In my last video about light application in Linux, a couple of people recommended lightweight Wayland compositors that should work and I should try them. First, let me say it's a sad state in which all those compositors are. I mean, Hyperlink is great, but the rest, the smaller ones, I'll make a separate video about that. So in order to try out all these compositors, you will have to have some basic applications if you want to see if things just work. So I chose a couple of programs that I can use in any Wayland compositors, and on my GitHub I made the simplest configuration that there can be for those applications. So for terminals I chose Electricity, Food and Kitty, and if you just start the program you will see that it has basic background, it will use shell that you want, and I put a bigger font size. So when you start the program it should look something like this, and if you look at the config file it has just the theme, decorations, those are those tab bars. I put that for Niri because Niri by default doesn't remove toolbars. Just some padding that it looks nicer, font size, and I want it for cursor to blink just so I know it's working, and this is useful. And every folder has this TLDR file, which is a little help file how to install the program and where is the config file. So if you start food for instance, it will be the same thing. Now if you look at the food config file, you'll see that I put a custom font in configuration, and that is just because if I remove the font type, sometimes depending on which font you have by default, it will look like this. So that's why I chose Hack, because I usually use Hack. And if you go to the TLDR file, you can see that I included which font I put in the configuration file, so you don't have to go to config file and look for what's in there. And this is pretty much for all programs that I put in here. For instance, if you look at the waybar, I have the simplest waybar that is needed for me to test something. It has the clock and it has this little search icon that runs puzzle. Workspaces work for Sway and Hyperlink. I don't care about workspaces that much. That's why if it shows okay, if it doesn't, it really doesn't matter. The most important thing is if I don't know the correct shortcut how to run programs, I can just go here with my mouse and run at least a terminal, and then I can look in the configuration. And if you go to TLDR file, you will see that I included how to install Waybar, also where to put the default file. Also, if you want just to copy default files that Waybar is offering, you can find them in this folder, and you need both config JSON and style CSS. And you can watch my video about Waybar, how to configure it if you want more details, but this is just for simple use. And I also put a command of some nerd fonts that you can install. You don't have to install all of them. You can just pick the one that you want, but it won't hurt if you have everything. And also Fuzzle is included. Mako are notifications that you get up here, and this is also the basic configuration. For you to be able to test the notifications, you have to install these two packages. Mako is the program itself, and eNotify is so you can test notifications by manually sending them. This is the default config file, so if you want to test a notification, you just run a command, and I don't know why KD put it down here. That's just KD being KDE, but that's the idea. And also if you want to change the configuration of Mako, you can just run this command. As I've seen on compositors that I have tested, you usually have inside of the config file option to run all these programs, but you can also run them through systemd, but I didn't make that option. The next is Sway BG, and this is just for the background. I included a few photos, but I usually just put a simple color, and it's this capuchin blue color, just because this syntax didn't work on all of them. So for instance, if I put this command in KDE, it will work without problem. And then there is Swaylock, that is just a lock screen that is absolutely not needed for me to test any Wayland compositor, but I put it here for the future use. And here I want to say one thing. On Arch you have Swaylock and Swaylock effects. Here I wrote if you want to just use Swaylock, then use config simple file, but you have to rename it to config file. And then I have a script just like on X11. I just don't know if it works, so you can ignore this folder. And in scripts I just have a simple script for recording your screen, just so I can quickly see if it will work with recording my screen. But this is also not necessary for me to actually test a Wayland compositor. And here I have a script with some of the programs that I found that I needed for some of the Wayland compositor, but it's by no way complete because sometimes I just install something and forget to put it on my list. So don't use this for anything. This is just for my personal use. And this is pretty much all I need to quickly test if a Wayland compositor is working on my old Mac or not, because on my more than 10-year-old laptop, even Hyperland works. And that's all.